Good morning, race fan. Brian Davis races, and you can too. Today we are at home getting ready to go race, but it's going to be hot today, or it's going to rain. Not sure which. Either way. Oh well, I know it's going to be hot. So I'm going to make myself a little ice sock. I'm going to sew this up real quick at the bottom, and if I think I have some Velcro, I'm going to make a Velcro top, which hopefully will be very thin. And then by the time the ice melts, I won't feel this thing. It's like pantyhose, except I don't have to throw it away. And I don't have pantyhose here today. But I have fabric, so I'm going to make it. Today we are at Muskego Park in Wisconsin. And we are parked in a neighborhood along with everyone else, because the park is over there, like a quarter mile. So I've done this race course numerous times in the normal Wisconsin racing calendar. It's a bit of a snoozer. My prediction for today is there will definitely be a move of 4 riders up the road, and then after that it will be a field sprint up a very long climb to get to the end, to the finish line. And I predict in the last 100 meters I will be hating my life choices, because that's going to be past the hill and all of the gas will be empty. Okay, those are my predictions. We'll see what happens in real life. Bye. All right, Brian Davis Races. Thanks for checking out the channel today. We are in Muskego Park, just outside of Milwaukee. Tour of America's Dairyland, day 7. And this race course, like I said in the intro, is part of the Wisconsin racing calendar typically every year. So I'm very familiar with the course. And I will say they did something completely different. They moved the start-finish line, which totally changes the complexion of this course. It makes it, honestly, a totally different event. So the Wisconsin event puts the start-finish line in the middle of the hill, so more or less. And this event put it 200 meters past the top of the hill. And it's a pretty straightforward course. There's just one sort of tricky technical turn, which is extra technical because of some significant pavement buckling, not a breakup, but buckling at the bottom of this the only hill that we're going to run into the bottom. We're going to make a hard right, but on the apex of the turn there's a significant buckle in the pavement that causes your bike to leap into the air right when you're turning your pedal, or you're turning your bike over at its maximum. So yeah, that's fascinating, but everyone handled the turn just fine, and it's far enough away from the finish that it's not a huge deal. As you can see, dive bombing the turn is totally possible on this turn. It's not an overly tight turn. It's not crazy. And if you do mess up the turn, you end up in some grass, not a curb, which I did, and numerous other people did too. So, pretty low consequence course, really. Big wide roads. It was funny how often we were sort of adhering to the yellow line rule for no reason, but that's just interesting to me. So anyway, I'm really happy about this course. My particular performance on this race went really well. I set all kinds of, like I said, I've done this course numerous times. I set all kinds of records for my fastest laps racing with these guys. There are some super talented bike riders in this field, and they are no joke, man. So it is a lot of horsepower on this field. So this is our first time up. It probably took me, my warm-up was a little poorly executed, but it wasn't awful. And I know this course sets up more as a road course than it does a crit course necessarily. So the warm-up is going to be out on course generally, unless you're trying to get into a move straight away. And I most certainly was not. My goal for today was survival, and yeah, I wasn't necessarily worried about placing. This is not a course that suits me at all. The hill is just a little too big, and the sprint is a little bit too long up the hill. So, sorry, coffee. So I can have a good short blast and put out pretty good power for my weight, but that hill is just too long for me to sustain that effort. So there was a good amount of this in the race, so there wasn't any significant moves off the front until there was. And to be honest with you, I have no idea when that occurred, but my prediction for this race was 100% correct. There was a 4-man move up the road. It included, I know, Carlos and one of the white brothers, and then the winner of the race, Ed, something I believe he's from Canada. Yeah, so hats off to them. Not sure who got fourth, and they were a minute and a minute, almost a lap up on the field. So I think they were somewhere around a minute ahead of us, and the lap, our fastest lap times were, or the Strava record for this lap is 1:17, and I think our fastest were like 1:21, somewhere in there. So they were a pretty good margin ahead of us, which makes sense on this course. So if you can get away and you're just a stronger rider, and you deserve to get away. So I'm going to talk real quick about that ice pack thing. I did do the ice sleeve down my back, and it was hot today, for Wisconsin standards at least. Now, I got to say that ice thing on my back felt amazing. It was great, and I cannot believe that I don't do this all the freaking time. It is unbelievable, guys. I mean, this is not a new secret, but holy smokes. A little bit of ice on your back on a hot day. Oh, it's awesome. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that. Now, when I was done racing, maybe that was the move. I think we pull these guys back. When I was done racing, I could see the flaw in my design of just using a scrap piece of fabric. The fabric was heavy and waterlogged, of course. Not enough that I cared about it. I certainly didn't feel it once it melted, but I can see why people use pantyhose, because it literally just disappears. The problem with pantyhose, though, is it rips. So there was somebody filling up their ice bag for their race, which was after ours, and you could see she had all kinds of rips in her pantyhose already before she'd even started, and I don't know. It's going to work. I mean, it's fine, but it's not ideal. So I have redesigned my ice sock, and I'll show you that in the next video, which is going to be day 8. So if you are on the YouTubes some other time, look for the thumbnail that says Toad Day 8, and you will see my redesigned ice sock. So I'm going to test out my design today and see how it goes. Alright, back to racing. So I had 2 teammates in this race, John and John. John with an H, John with an N, and Johnny, as we refer to him, is the shorter rider, and there's Johnny on cue right behind me in the rear view, and John, Jon, is significantly taller, and they both have their strengths. So there's John, who's up to my left, about 11 o'clock on your dial right now. He's through some traffic in the red and black kit further away from me. So good to have teammates, and I'll tell you that teammate John, Jon, pushed me to a higher level than I was prepared to go. When we skip to the end here in a little bit, so he did some work for me, which I don't know if, I mean, it was for me, so I appreciate that. I don't know that I'm in the position to be considered a stronger rider than Johnny by any means at this point, or John himself, but I know he had me in mind when he was doing it. So I appreciate that, John, and you definitely inspired me to come out of my skin and race really hard. So my normalized power on this course was 316, which is pretty bonkers for me. I don't think I've ever seen a normalized power that high. And in theory, my FTP is 334, although I think that number is a little outdated and optimistic from when I was in the throes of Trainer Road. So, yeah, I think there were around 60 guys in our field, and amazingly, I think we only dropped like 2 people, which is fascinating to me. I felt like the field got a lot smaller throughout the day. So maybe they didn't get dropped, but they were off the back or something like that. So those 4 guys off the front, you know, that's not going to clear out a whole lot of bodies. And yeah, by the end of the race, I mean, there's still plenty of people crowding around, but it didn't feel like the beginning of the race, I'll tell you that much. So this race was supposed to be 55 minutes. I think we did that. It was, like I said in the intro, it was cut short. Normally we're 60, but we were 55, which is fine. They have to get out of the park by a certain time, I'm sure, so they cut everybody down just a little bit to give themselves extra time to get out. And then so like logistics for this race were interesting. You couldn't park in the park, which is good because that would have been awful to deal with traffic in the park. But everyone was parking in the neighborhood next door, and for the most part the neighborhood people were fine, but there was 1 or 2 that were being weird about get off my lawn kind of vibe. So that's unfortunate, but that happens. So Another logistical thing. They told us that staging was going to be at the bottom of this turn, where we make this sharp turn at the bottom of the hill, and then we were all going to parade pace up to the start line. That actually didn't happen. There was a cut through in the neighborhood. You could get to the start finish line through a little path in the woods. Look at that! Oh, that's ridiculous. There's no reason to push somebody. There's plenty of space for that guy. Ah, man. So he pushed my teammate, and like, I just don't understand. I don't understand that mentality. Like, there's plenty of room. You don't have to get all agitated. It's 14 minutes into a 55-minute race, and thankfully my teammate handled it well and didn't get all agitated about that push, but that's ridiculous. So I suppose he would say it's ridiculous that my teammate didn't move over, but that's not really his job. So I don't know. Whatever. That's bike racing. Overall, I will say this vibe for our race has been great. Everyone's been really friendly, and I'm sure those guys will be friendly later on in the week. No big deal. Overall, the vibe's been really friendly. So, all right. So this guy in front of me right now, he's got very wide elbows. Later in the race, when he gets tired, he puts his hands up on the hoods and he stretches his elbows out. And I saw him in the pits afterwards. So he's a super strong, athletic, physically fit rider, but this is a good example of somebody that could use rollers. So if that guy would get rollers, he would smooth out his arms, he would smooth out his body language, and he'd be a much more efficient racer in the spring and summer if he would spend a little bit of time on rollers in the winter. Even just like once a week, if you're being called out by someone on a YouTube video that you need rollers, you should buy rollers, and you should do that once a week, and you will be amazed at how much smoother you are in the peloton. So, pro tip, if you feel nervous or you feel like you're twitchy, rollers will knock that out of you. Also, there's some fit things that you can do to fix that twitchiness. So if you're, I'm going to have you do what I say and not what I do, but my arms end up getting pretty locked out, which is unfortunate. Every time I see a photo of myself, I feel like I'm in a pretty athletic position, but in reality, my arms are locked out. So you can see most of the guys around me have a nice bend in their arms, and that absorbs a lot of shock and allows them some flexibility to move the bike back and forth and absorb a blow if somebody were to touch them or something like that, or even run over a crack in the pavement or whatever it is. So yeah, proper bike fit will help out a lot. So anyway, just my advice on not being sketchy is to get rollers. And he wasn't sketchy. I don't mean to throw him under the bus, but you can feel the tension around some riders when you're near them. You can just feel how tense they are in a race, and that's just wasting energy. So for their own benefit, if they would figure out a way to calm down a little bit, they'd save a lot of energy. So this is a good moment where I'm saving energy. So the field's going to come in here and crash into this turn again and again and again, and I finally started to figure this out. Like, well, if I'm going to be tail gunning in the back, I'm going to tail gun in correctly, and I'm going to try to lay off the field enough that I can just coast into this turn and not have to produce any power coming down that hill. So typically when you'd come down that hill, you'd have to put in some amount of power to stay with the group, and a couple of the times I didn't want to do that. So I just coasted, put my head down, and tried to get in a tuck in the back and swoop into the group and then cut that turn on my own terms, and I could carry a lot more speed through the turn and then catch the group here. It's a little bit of a risky game to play because if they get too far ahead of you, you definitely need to put some power down to catch them, but it's a risk I was willing to take at this point. I was pretty gassed at this stage of the race, so I think we're past the critical point of bike racing of 13 minutes. So by 13 minutes, I was definitely feeling like I was in trouble, and then I looked at my watch or my Garmin and I saw 13 minutes and I felt much better about myself, and sure enough, things definitely slowed down. So I think those 4 riders are off the front by now if I had to guess. So they're in for a bit of a long day. That's a guess. Like I said, I don't know when they left. So maybe if one of them are watching, they could let us know about when they left. Whoa, all right, there's Derek's. So Derek on clip. So what happens there is getting in a crash going uphill happens surprisingly more often than you would think. That was not a crash, but the rider ahead of him, and this could have been like 4 riders up, right? So the rider ahead of him moves and shifts and stands up and throws his bike back, and then that has a domino effect of 3-4 guys back, and then you see what happened to Derek there, the person in the fluoro jersey had to unclip, and now he's going to have to catch the group, which he does. He's right there on my left now in front of me, but he's certainly got my attention. So earlier in the week, Derek and I flipped over somebody else, and he crashed on top of me, so I asked him if, after the race, if he was just trying to return the favor and let me land on top of him, and in which case I do not need that. So, yada, yada, yada. All right, let's see. I think I'm going to skip ahead here pretty soon, but I'm just going to do that now. So I'm going to skip ahead to the end, and we'll take a look at the last 2 laps, I believe. All right, 1, 2, skip a few. Let's get to the end. I'm not quite sure how many laps are left, so 52 is the duration, and I think we did end up racing for an hour. I don't think it ended up being 55 minutes. All right, so this is the bottom of the hill, or after the turn. So typically in the WCA race, this would be maybe not quite when you want to open your sprint, but if you had a teammate, this is absolutely when you'd want the teammate to open the sprint, is right before that turn and try to carry you through this flat. And then hopefully you would leap off them to finish this race. But that's way too far away on this particular start-finish setup that you are definitely not going to be wanting to sprint in this flat. All right, that's a little bit of a spoiler for later on, that this hill just takes a lot longer than you think to get up this bad boy. So you can see if you watch the dot in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, how far that distance is from the start-finish, and we'll just sort of get used to that distance as we approach the finish. So the coupe has already been flown by those other 4 riders, of course. They're way gone by now. And now we have a flurry of attacks. I think there's however many laps there are to go. But there's a few attacks here, which are great because that sort of straightens up the field. I had made my way up to the front of the group because I was concerned about this. Oh, maybe this was a $50 preem. That's what it was. It was a $50 preem. And I thought, I need to be up here, not because I want to win a preem, but because things are going to get awful spicy after that. So that lap counter said 3 to go, and somebody said they messed up the lap counter, so we'll see if that's true. But that lap counter there just for sure said 3 to go. I didn't notice that they messed up the lap counter, but we'll find out because it is recorded. All right, so I did a good. So the preem settles down. No one's going to go for a 2 or 3 man breakaway up the road, I guess. So everyone starts to settle in for reality that there's definitely going to be a sprint here. And you can see the swamp coming on the left hand and the right hand side. So what they call that when you're bike racing is if you're near the front and guys in the back that are concerned start to speed up and come around you on the left and right, that's called getting swamped. So they were definitely on their way up to swamp us. So in order to stay up to the top, you really need to stay in the lead, move over to the swamping line, swamp the front, recycle yourself back, move over to the swamping line, hit the front, float back, move over again to the swamping line, go back up to the front, hit the front. You know, you get the point. So you have to kind of recycle yourself through and through and through in order to be able to stay at the front at these types of races. And the front is relative, right? So like right now I'm probably 15th, and behind me it's hard to tell, but there's still an awful long crowd of guys behind me. So it's easy to watch a video like this and say, well, why don't you move up right now? Why don't you move up right now? And the reason is because I'm tired. And these guys are going fast. And so we're going 24, 25 miles an hour on this flat, and we're about to hit a hill. It's hard to talk yourself into attacking right before you hit a significant hill, that's for sure, unless your plan is to break away, which is not a good plan right now. With this few laps left, there's going to be a lot of pent-up strength in this group, and people are not going to let anybody just sort of walk away, right? So there's the series leader from yesterday, Emil, off to my right. He went for a preem, and just seeing his sprint from 100 yards away was, holy cow, that is impressive. So he's definitely a veteran racer. He's raced all over the country, and everyone is very familiar with Emil, but I don't think I've ever actually met him, but definitely a powerhouse. Holy smokes. Super fast and very comfortable moving around the group, that's for sure. So it's kind of fun to, it's not kind of fun, it's awesome to race with people like that, because you learn so much just by being around them and watching them race and following their wheel for a while and seeing how they dart around through traffic. It's impressive. So I totally enjoy learning from the guys that I race with. So that is fun to do, and I don't think anyone should stop learning. I'm sure they learn things here and there as well, even after they've been doing this for years and years and years. And I've been doing it for years as well, but I guess I'm not as fast as they are. So, so here's my teammate John. I missed the lap counter. I apologize. So I don't know. I can probably tell when John goes up. But based on John, I can tell what's going to happen because I remember this part of the race. So I get on John's wheel. I know John knows I'm there. And I think this is 2 to go. John's sort of biding his time. We're going to recycle up to the front. But with 1 to go, John's going to come to the front and give a real hearty pull to the group. John also did the same thing when there was like 7 to go. He straightened it out. And that was cool because with 7 to go, everyone was getting a really good rest, and John was able to come through and stretch it out again and make it hard. And I swear we had to lose 1 or 2 people when he did that, so I appreciate that he did that as well. Yeah, so we'll get through this half lap, and then it'll be a good lesson to watch John go up to the front, and then my commentary on how that affected my race. So that's my other teammate, Johnny, ahead of me there. And then at this point, I remember thinking, all right, I got to move up a little bit. So I'm going to spend some energy moving up. Do I want to be on the front of this race? No, I do not. But I have a really good feeling there's other people behind me that are moving up with me. So if I sort of die out right here, someone's going to come up to the front. Oh, look at that. Somebody came up to the front. Perfect. So I can recycle myself up to the front. So that's a great example of getting into the swamp line and then recycling yourself. Now I'm in the front, right? This is great, but I'm going to get overtaken because other people are going to come swamp us when we are going up, especially when we're going up the hill. That happens quite a bit up the hill. So I have my teammate, and I know John's a super strong rider, so I'm confident that he is going to move himself up when he gets the opportunity, and that he will allow me to follow him because he's doing this for me. So he read this perfectly. There's a moment coming up here. He's going to straighten out, and I'm going to move over and command that wheel, which was great, and I appreciate that person letting me do that. And that was the moment right there. So there's an opening. You got to move up right there. I think he's going to do it. Go, John. Go, John. Go, John. Because if you don't do it at that moment, things are going to slow down up front because those guys are getting tired. They just pulled up that whole hill, and they are going to start stretching things wide, which is going to block off our access to get to the front. So John is going to determine that is the case here. Now I don't actually want to be right on John's wheel because we have a long way to go to the finish, and I don't want to expect John's going to take me this whole route. So I fade back from John a little bit right there, and I want to, ideally, if I can get like 5th wheel at this stage, that'd be great because there's definitely a lot of real estate between here and the finish line. So 27 miles an hour makes it hard for other people to come around us. It makes it hard for people to do a 1-lap flyer, which I'm sure a lot of people had in their mind, but we're going 32 miles an hour, 33 miles an hour. Yeah, that's just going to be very difficult for somebody to come around that. So John totally reshaped the face of this race because I guarantee you if John had not gone up there and pulled like that, someone would have leapt off the front and tried to do a one-man solo thing, which would have created some amount of havoc, and people would have been starting things way earlier. So John drops back, and now it's up to me, and I totally screw the pooch. I will say that I was very tired at this point, and I did not want to sprint, but after John went up there, I was like, okay, I got to do something. Now you can see all those guys dive bomb the corner, and that was probably the right move on that last corner, was to dive bomb that thing, because they jumped up 5, 6, well, however far back they were, but they jumped up a lot. Now I'm in a pretty good position, but my huge mistake here is I didn't get into that draft as aggressively as I needed to. I really needed to push elbows to get into that draft, and there's room, like you can see from the rear view camera, there's room for me to do that. I just well, I guess there was that rider there was in my blind spot, but there was room. I could have done it, and I didn't, and that was a failure. So now you're going to watch some people come up on the left, and they are going to hit it hard, and a lot of people try to catch them, which is great, and I just didn't have the horsepower there. So you can see my sprint going, but there's still a long way to this finish line, and I am out of gas. So That's the moment right there. I tried to get up and fire again with 200 meters, but 600 watts is not gonna it's not gonna do the job here. So I mentally shut off right here. So I ended up with 21st on this race, but you can see I'm not gonna let, but another 1, 2, and I think there was somebody on my left as well. I think there's like 4 guys that finished in the last 10 feet ahead of me. So anyway, that's the channel. Thanks for checking out. Our goal on this channel is to grow our sport, grow our knowledge, and grow our fitness. I hope I delivered that to you today. If you do get a chance, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell icon to be notified when I put out new content. And be sure to check out Toad Day number 8 and see the revised, new and improved ice sock. And I'll let you know if it worked or not, or if my crazy idea is completely stupid. Tune in and find out. Bye-bye.